Eh, Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our study abroad podcast series. Today, we have Alan from Singapore, from whom we'll know about his journey about studying abroad in Singapore. So, welcome, Alan, to our podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So, Alan, let's start with our questions. Very first question that I have is what made you decide to go for a study abroad journey?
Um, to be honest, that probably wasn't the most conventional thought process. I finished my undergrad from BITS Pilani Goa campus. So after that, I wanted to work um, in something related to management consulting or finance, for example. And while I had those inroads, even while I was at BITS, I believe that I wanted to go to some of the world's best business schools. So my idea or my criteria was not to just go abroad, but I wanted to go to a highly reputed university, and those are the ones that you do find abroad. My alternative were obviously the Indian Institutes of Management and ISB, for example. But I believe that I had already studied for 5 years in India, so I did understand the Indian education system. So I wanted to try something new, something different. So if I got the best of both worlds, that is, I get the best education and also international exposure, that would be really good for my CV, for my career prospects later on, and for my professional and student journey.
Did you apply to like how many universities or colleges you applied to for your study abroad
Right. So
application?
again, my plan was, again, the list was INSEAD, London Business School, HEC, Paris, and probably a few US universities like maybe Duke or so on. So I made an entire list, but I applied to INSEAD. That was the first university I applied to, and I got in. So after that, I didn't really apply to anything else.
So INSEAD was quite smart in getting you at the very first, keeping the
Exactly.
deadlines
I applied
relatively.
in round one, super early, which probably also helps with admission chances. The earlier you apply, the better it is.
And what are the documents you need to submit for this admission process?
So for INSEAD, when you do the application process, you obviously upload your things like transcripts, for example, and but yeah, basically just your transcripts and documents. Maybe like if you if your education was not in English, your higher education was not in English, they need a proof of like IELTS, for example. You'll obviously need your GRE scorecard, your GRE or your GMAT scorecard. But those are pretty much the documents that you need. And for the visa processes, obviously things like your passport, again, all the documents, your admission letters, all of that. But that depends from country to country and university to university. But I think it becomes a very simplified process because you get all the documents that you have to give, and it becomes very easy.
And do you also have to give any recommendation letters from professors?
Oh yes, of course. So the recommendation letters, again, that is something not that I don't provide. It is something that has to be provided by the people who vouch for me. So for INSEAD, I had to submit two recommendation letters. One of them was from my professor from BITS, and the second one was from the director at a company that I interned at. So he gave the second one. It's usually good to have a blend of academic and professional letter of recommendations. But again, this is something we don't provide. The link goes directly to the recommender. They fill up everything. They fill up the information, the letters, and so on. And so that's not something I can take part.
But you are ready
Oh,
to write
definitely.
something from
Exactly. You have to
who
let
did you
them
choose
know
for
all
this?
of that. Right?
Who were the people who gave you recommendation for your admission? Your
So
professors?
as I mentioned, my professor from BITS and the director at the company that I interned at. So I had to tell them about INSEAD and that I was applying there, and then you give their email IDs and the recommendation goes to them.
Two recommendation letter or three?
Two, but again, it's all university specific. So it might be three for something else. It might be one for another, but yeah.
So as a BITS Goa alumni, did you have to write IELTS or GRE or TOEFL, anything of
Exactly. So I gave my IELTS. I think I got an 8.5 or a 9. I think a 9, I don't remember exactly, but it turned out to not be necessary at the end because when I was applying, if your higher education language of all the courses are taught in English, then you don't really need your IELTS. But I would suggest getting it done just in case because certain universities will still require an IELTS. I think some university in the UK, an example, I think it's compulsory. So it's again university specific.
And when you are writing this IELTS, I think at the end of the test, you have to give some college codes, like some
Right,
key. So did you give
right,
INSEAD
right,
as one
right.
of the college?
Uh, I don't remember to be honest, but yeah, I think you have a certain list of. It's the same thing for GRE or GMAT where you can provide those college codes. Uh, but yeah, I think the thing is that when I was submitting my application for INSEAD, I just had to upload my GRE scorecard. So um, yeah, so I think the direct sending thing also probably was not required. So those sort of requirements that are again university specific. Some universities are very strict about getting the official copy and so on.
So how was your transition from, let's say, your hometown to Goa, then to Singapore? How do you see the lifestyle change in these
Um,
places?
right. So just wanted to mention I just came to Singapore last month, but that's because the INSEAD program is when it starts off in France. So I actually left for France from August to February, I was in France, and then March onwards, I was in Singapore. So it's a program in both countries. Um, I mean, I grew up in Delhi, went to college in Goa, but I have lived abroad previously as well. I did schooling in the US as well, so it wasn't too much of a dramatic change. I have lived abroad before. But I think, yeah, there are obviously a few things that you need to get accustomed to. It's more about things like if weather bothers you, for example, if food bothers you. For me, food also isn't a problem. I'm fine with eating everything. Those are the sort of things. But there's this minor factors probably that seem a little different for certain people. I think it's a lot quieter. Those small little things that's very subtle differences from India, but it turns out to be pretty fine. I mean, if you when you're immersed in the learning environment, when you're with your peer group and so on, I think that's what's more important. The external factors, yeah, they might be a little different. For some people, it might throw you off, but it's not something that's too difficult to get over.
So in France, the INSEAD campus in France is in Fontainebleau, right? Which
Yes.
is a bit off from Paris, like
Oh,
who I
definitely, definitely,
so that
definitely.
was
It's
like
about
the
an hour
village
away.
kind of thing,
Exactly. So it's
whereas
about an
Singapore
hour
is
away. So that is, I think, one thing that was different for me because I always grew up in big cities. Delhi, lived in Mumbai and Bangalore. So shifting to something that was a really small village, yeah, that was a little different. And also, like things like on Sundays, nothing's open. Streets are like dark at night. Uh, there's a few cultural differences, obviously, but yeah, I think it was all fine for me. It was good.
sure. So I guess because you already lived at many places, you are already
Right,
accustomed to that cultural differences.
right,
So the
right.
change was normal to you. But
Right.
you may have some peers and all who might
Definitely.
struggle a
That's
bit more. You could see
uh,
that.
100%. So first, the biggest struggle I think I saw with peers was I think food, especially if you're vegetarian, becomes very hard when you're, and depends. But like in Europe, I think when you're vegetarian, it is pretty hard to get around. So, and certain people have a preference for Indian food. For me, I didn't really have that. So, if finding good Indian food or Indian food ingredients, for example, those things become a problem. Certain people also, especially who grew up in the south, had a problem with the cold. So the weather becomes another thing. Language could be another when you have to communicate with locals and so on. But again, when you're with a peer group and you're with your friends, you're going out with them, uh, basically. So it doesn't become too much of a problem. You can get around with your peers pretty fine.
So right now, I think INSEAD has four campuses, right? Like Singapore,
Yes,
Fontainebleau, Abu Dhabi, and one in US also,
yes.
San Francisco, I
Yeah,
guess.
they have an innovation hub in San Francisco.
So you had to choose which campuses would you go to, or it was like
Okay, so we don't really choose the campus. Our program starts off in France for the first 6 months, and the last 4 months are in Singapore. But then we have study trips that we can go to. So we can go to Abu Dhabi, um, or the US, or China. So the China is a study trip. While they don't have a campus, you can go there as well, or Singapore, and you have to go to a study trip to graduate. So people do go to the other campuses as well. That's for about a week or so. But the program is based in Fontainebleau and then Singapore.
So yours is MBA or MIM program?
Mine's the MIM program for less than 2 years of
1 year
work
only.
experience. And yes, it's 10 months long, but the MBA at INSEAD is also the same duration.
Okay. So I think usually MIM programs are 2 years in most colleges. I guess MBA can be
Again,
1 year or
depends.
2 year.
It could be two, there are some that are three as well with an optional gap year.
3 years also. Yeah.
But INSEAD does it, they do a very short, intense program. So we do it in basically 10 months.
So INSEAD MIM is very similar to MBA, the junior version, right?
Yeah, it's very similar. We have the same professors, we have almost the same classes, and because it's the same 10-month duration, so pretty similar in a lot of ways. And basically at half the cost, so becomes a pretty good
Yeah, and
value
freshers
proposition.
can join as a fresher.
Definitely,
You can
definitely.
join MIM, whereas for
Right.
MBA you need 2 3 years of work ex at
Minimum
least.
2 years, yes. But on average, people they have about 4 to 5 years of work ex.
Yeah, sure. And how do you see the education? The like you studied in BITS Goa, right? So
Mhm.
there the professors used to teach in a way. Let's say in Delhi, in your school, you saw
Right,
some teaching style, and in
right,
INSEAD, like in France, you had some teaching style. Maybe in Singapore,
right,
you had. How do you
right.
see the teaching scale, the education standard of, let's say, India versus abroad, or even for that
Um,
matter, Delhi versus BITS?
Right. So I think BITS also had a pretty good level of education. However, the difference is mainly on like what you study and how it's taught. So because BITS was again undergraduate engineering, it's very theoretical, very math based. So you go to your classes, you give your exams, you give your tests, you give your exam, which are again a lot of numbers, a lot of calculation, so on. So very similar to how we gave exams in back in school, for example. However, when you're here in business school, I think business school, especially the international business school, it's very case based. So the learning is, you learn from your peers. There's a lot of discussion. It's not like the professor is talking and you're taking notes. It's like you discuss, you give your insights. For some classes, more than the others, obviously. Uh, for very theoretical classes, it's again pretty similar, but for things like strategy and so on, you have a lot of discussion and you learn from cases, real life examples. So that was obviously very interesting, very entertaining. And the exams also they depend from course to course. So while some of them might have pen and paper based exam, the others could be just like a group assignment could be your final exam. You could have writing a paper for an exam. So there's obviously differences there. I think the teaching quality is different because you have professors from all over the world. And they're some of the best professors in the world, obviously, highly acclaimed, and all their books also sell for, they sell in the best business schools around the world as well. So the insights that you get from them is very different from obviously the peer group and the professors that you would find back in India. So overall, the learning experience is great. Most importantly, our cohort is very diverse. So we have about, I don't know, 35 countries, probably like students from all these countries. So you get different insights, cultural insights, business insights, academic insights from people all across the world. I think that's the biggest asset that you don't find in India because in India it's very homogeneous. Everyone's lived the same lives. Over here it's very different. And yeah, I think that's the best part of studying abroad.
Is the accommodation part of this, or you have to find your own accommodation?
We have to find our own accommodation.
Okay.
So
So,
in France
how
and
was that accommodation hunting like in Fontainebleau versus Singapore?
Right. So in Fontainebleau, I got lucky. I got a student residence that was really affordable, very close to campus as well. You had to apply early because it gets filled up. So that was good from that end. Other people, you have to find houses, so you have to again go online. You get resources from the university and stuff, but it's mostly you have to handle all of that process. So it's It's all done on your own. You find your roommates, you figure that stuff out. For Singapore, again, I had to find my own house, so went online, got a you look online, you reach out to people. Everything's done on your own, but it's pretty rewarding. You can find what you want. You get the flexibility for it.
And there is a lot of learning. You actually
Definitely.
learn how to hunt your things down.
Definitely. You have to, handle everything as an adult. You have to cook, you have to clean, you have to find your own house, figure your own transportation. So all of those things are there.
So, before joining, let's say the Fontainebleau campus, you knew some of your batchmates. Were you in connect
Yes,
with them?
yes. So
Did
we,
that help a bit?
of course it did. I mean, you have to find roommates and stuff. So for people who were getting shared houses, we connected with them. So there was a LinkedIn community which was created. There was also an Indian group chat. So there are about 31 Indians in our cohort. So we created an Indian group chat where we shared all important updates. If there was any doubts to ask. So you already, created friendships before we started the course itself.
Yeah, sure. And what is the total strength of your batch, approx?
I think it's 178 this
178.
time. So
35
it's good.
countries, 178. So it's like three, four people, five, six
Right.
people kind of.
Again, it's dependent on the proportion of population. So there's about 30 Indians and 30 Chinese, and
Okay, okay, I
then
see.
it depends on how many people are there in each
Okay,
country.
okay. It's all population proportional.
Right, exactly.
Okay, okay, sure. So what's your future goal after this? Like, where do you want to work, etc.? You have decided anything like in which
Right.
field?
So I already have a job offer in management consulting. So I will be working in management consulting in the financial services division, basically in capital markets. So that's all what I've always wanted to work in. Works for me. And again, this is the role is based in India. So uh, that's also what I wanted to do. I wanted to go back to India. Um, at least at some point. But if I get a good job offer with great pay in India right now itself, that's something I wouldn't refuse. So that's something I'm considering. I was in the interview processes with companies outside as well, but then there's a lot of things you need to consider, things like visa restrictions, things like language requirements, which become a barrier. And in terms of yeah, if you just look at it in terms of an ROI, I would say that um, India is also not a bad option if you get a really high paying job, because if you go to good schools, they pay you really well. And if you look at purchasing power parity, I think you do end up saving a lot more, making a lot more money even in India. So that's my plan, and I know what I'm doing in my career.
So you have already decided you are joining this Indian companies, or it's one of the
Yes.
options?
Right. No, that I have decided that I will be joining that Indian company. I mean, it's not an Indian company. It's a global management
Okay.
consulting firm, but the Indian office basically. Um, yeah, I think for me it was very clear, but because I wanted to work in management consulting and in something finance related, so it ticks my career aspirations. And for me, I think career aspirations are a lot more important than where I stay. For example, I think staying abroad is also pretty good, but then it comes with its own pitfalls. And I wanted the industry that I wanted to get in more than the location that I wanted to be.
And how did you find this job?
So for me, they came on campus, like on campus recruiting. So it was pretty straightforward interviews and got the job offer. However, this is the outlier, honestly, because most in outside there's nothing called on-campus recruiting. You have to go to career fairs. You have to basically go network with people. You have to go reach out to them on your own, and it's a lot of work that you have to do. So again, this concept of like on-campus recruiting or placements that we have in India is not something that's followed abroad. So this was honestly the only company that came on campus, which is a stroke of good luck. But otherwise, you have to basically just reach out to recruiters on LinkedIn. You have career options that are posted on a career website, and you have to apply on that website just like everybody else. So that is something people have to consider.
And how many people did they hire from your
They
campus?
had 6 people from our cohort.
So this was also like an early, so you always got lucky with, let's say,
Yes,
getting INSEAD as the first
definitely.
college
Yeah, definitely.
conversion, and then the job
Exactly.
conversion also happened for
Definitely.
you. So you didn't have
Definitely.
to really struggle, right?
Yeah, not really, not really. But I'm aware of it because I was going through the interview processes. I was in the interview processes for 2 or 3 companies. I'm still in the interview process for a few, which I will not be going ahead with. But those were multiple rounds. So probably the fourth round for one company. I was in the final round for another company as well in the interview process. So these are all international companies. Um, Again, rotational programs. So some start in India, which is why they sometimes look for Indian nationals. These are programs where Indians do have an edge. Because otherwise, when you apply for generic programs, you often have problems with the visa and with language requirements, where the Europeans probably have an edge. Um, but yeah, so I think for me, it worked out pretty well.
Company that came to INSEAD, let's say, uh, company probably showed the willingness that, I would like to come to INSEAD and maybe hire some of your students. INSEAD
Yes.
as a college may not probably have hunted them down. Is that right
So
assessment?
usually they don't do that, but this time actually, INSEAD, the career services team actually went to India and did a trip to understand the Indian business environment. So I think it's because of that. But yeah, usually because companies do not approach institutes to hire people as it is done in India. So abroad, it's more like companies might come on campus to give a campus presentation, but then the application process is again applying on a website just like everybody else. Certain firms like the MBBs like McKinsey, BCG, Bain can come on campus, do their campus presentations, and then they have a hiring so they have a hiring cycle, basically, or a time frame when they will um, accept students from INSEAD. So there is an INSEAD hiring wave, and during the hiring wave, they accept, yeah, they hire from INSEAD. So that is probably the only thing that you get, but otherwise, it's just mainly just them coming on campus, giving a presentation, going away, and then you apply on your own.
Sure. And do you also get in touch with your seniors or something like alumni members? Any interaction with?
Yes, of course. So again, during the job search, a lot of it was networking with the seniors, the people who have similar jobs, because most importantly, they will give you referrals for jobs. So you definitely need to keep in touch with them to get referrals. You want to figure out where they are working, what all opportunities are open. That's the most important thing. But also, I think they will just give you general insights on how to navigate INSEAD, how to navigate certain things. So when I was doing a visa process, I reached out to probably a senior as well, and they explained me how to go about it.
And the last question, any advice that you would like to give your juniors who are aspiring for MIM and study abroad programs?
Um, I would say that think about it very clearly about where you want to go, why you want to go, and how it fits in with your career aspirations. I would say it's very foolish in a way to just simply take the leap and go abroad just for the sake of going abroad. Because, yeah, if you do not go to a good university, for example, then you probably don't have job opportunities. If you don't go to the right country, where they don't really hire people who are international students, then again, you're in trouble. So you need to know what you're stepping into, what your prospects are. Speak to people who've gone to that university, who are probably working somewhere. You need to understand how the university is. You need to understand what your prospects are after. And also, just don't go abroad just to go abroad, because they will look at your previous experience, they will look at your previous university. It needs, so the jobs you need to apply to have to be relevant to what your previous work experience is. You cannot just jump to any random industry. So make sure that the university and the course that you're selecting is the right fit for you and the right fit for your career, and that's exactly where you want to go. So just give it a good hard thought basically before um, going abroad.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alan, for your time and sharing your knowledge and insights. We'll end the podcast now. Thank you very much for your
Sure.
time.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for having me.